Okay, just come into this crop of winter barley here in the East Cork area, and it's almost all fully eared out. Crops at the moment generally are at different stages of awns appearing, and there's places here where we're only seeing awns, and there's also places where this crop is well into flower. One of the things that struck me when I came in was the amount of 6-row heads that are around. You can see them standing up over the crop in lots of places, and that could be volunteers from a crop of 6-row last year or the year before, or it could be a sown mixture of 2 and 6-row, which some people use to try and keep crows out of the crop on one hand, and also to try and improve the overall quality of the grain post-harvest. That's the second reason why people would do it. This is a really good, heavy, thick crop of winter barley. Plenty heads in it, a combination of 2 and 6-row, but there's just plenty heads there. And the nice thing about it is that it's pretty clean from the top to the bottom. And if you focus in particular down at the bottom of the crop, you can see leaves just beginning to turn white and pale, and they're basically dying off because the plant is getting the signal that there's not enough light coming down here, so there's no point in keeping these leaves alive, which is a good sign of a dense crop. That should happen. That's the way it's supposed to happen. And as those leaves die, the various nutrients that are in them can be retranslocated back up to help to fill the grain. If you get dull days or something else isn't optimum on top, the lower foliage dying off helps to overcome that. One of the things I noticed looking at the upper leaves on the crop is that a number of leaves have these little brown spots on them, and it's often confusing for people as to what they are. Sometimes they're not much more than a brown spot, but there's always the risk that when weather gets warm that they could be brown rust in the making. And one of the characteristics that I would always use to identify brown rust is that the brown spot would have a yellow halo around it. Some of these have a yellow halo around them, so it makes me a small bit suspicious that maybe it was brown rust attempting to break through, or maybe it's not, maybe it's something else. But we can safely say, looking at this one, that it's not an active lesion of brown rust, that's for sure, because if it was, the rust, that little brown spot in the centre, would be after breaking through the epidermis. You can see it with your naked eye, and if you rub your finger across the brown spot, you'd find that you'd leave a brown trail on your finger, which is the spores that would be coming through the surface of the leaf. So, you know, just anywhere along there, you'd begin to see that it would happen, but you'd be rubbing the upper surface rather than the lower surface to see if they would rub off. And I can't see any signs of it rubbing off on my hand, but then it doesn't surprise me because I know it's not an active lesion. I'm just used to watching and looking at these things. So hopefully it's not, and hopefully it's not a threat either. But it is a danger in terms of what could happen if we get a spell of warm weather. Here we can see the anthers, which are the male parts of a flower. Every flower has both a male and a female bit. The anther is the male bit, and after fertilization has taken place, it tends to get turfed out. It's a physical turfing out of a material which could cause problems if it was left inside. So the anthers are turfed out in the florets that have already flowered and hopefully fertilized, and they then will fall off just as it's happening there in the wind, and it's good and healthy that they actually fall off as well. If a particular floret, which is the makings of a grain, didn't flower, it would actually remain open in the hope that pollen from another plant or further up the head might actually be able to fall in and subsequently fertilize that particular one. Flowering is always ununiform. Not every grain will flower on the same day. Generally speaking, in here, in that part of the head, will flower first, and then after that it moves down and moves up until they're all flowered and hopefully fertilized. This particular crop seems to have quite a few 6-row heads about, and this particular one here, you'll notice that flowering is almost complete. They're just earlier developing than the 2 rows. I'm not sure if the crop is a sown mixture of 2 and 6-row, or whether or not the 6 rows that are around the crop are volunteers from a previous crop, maybe last year. It's not uncommon that seeds of 6-row varieties survive very strongly in the ground for a year or maybe even 2 years, and they can cause problems if you're sowing a different crop, like be it wheat or oats or something else. and you can see here again the 6 rows. It's quite different to the 2 row in that grains are located all the way around the ear, whereas on a 2 row variety it tends to be flat, and it's called 2 row because they're just one opposite the other. That's just why the terminology is used. This one did have the capability to produce 6 rows, but 4 of them are sterile, and the sterile units can be seen in there on the edge if you go in closely to take a look at them.